The fisherman thought it was driftwood until he saw it move. A German shepherd, 135 miles from shore, no boat in sight, no life jacket, paddling against the current with the last of his strength. No one could explain how he got there. No one knew why his eyes held the sharp, calculating gaze of a soldier, and no one, especially not the men hunting him, expected him to survive. The ocean stretched endlessly under a cloudless sky, its surface smooth as glass, a deceptive calm that seasoned fishermen like Jack Reynolds knew to distrust. He adjusted the brim of his worn cap, squinting against the glare of the midday sun. 6 hours into his trip, the only thing he'd caught was frustration. The tuna weren't biting, and the radio had been silent for miles. Then a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first, he dismissed it as driftwood, just another piece of wreckage carried by the currents. But something about the way it cut through the water, fighting the tide instead of drifting with it, made his pulse quicken. He grabbed his binoculars, the lenses focusing on a dark shape bobbing in the swells. His breath hitched. It was a dog, a German shepherd, soaked and exhausted, paddled desperately to keep its nose above the surface. No boat in sight, no land, just open ocean for miles. Jack's stomach tightened. How? Without thinking, he gunned the engine toward the struggling animal. As he neared, the reality turned his blood cold. The dog's strokes were slowing, his muzzle barely clearing the waves. He was drowning. Jack killed the engine, yanked off his shirt, and dove in. The shock of the water barely registered. Salt stung his eyes as he swam, his muscles burning with each stroke. When he reached the dog, the shepherd's legs gave out. His body went limp, sinking. Jack hooked an arm around him, kicking hard toward the boat. "Hold on, boy," he gasped. "Just hold on." Back on deck, the dog collapsed, his ribs heaving. Jack draped a tarp over him, pouring fresh water into his mouth. The shepherd didn't whimper, didn't growl, just stared up at Jack with exhausted, knowing eyes. Jack scanned the empty horizon, his mind racing. What kind of monster leaves a dog to die in the middle of the sea? And why did this one refuse to drown? The dog lay motionless on the deck, his fur matted with salt water, his sides rising and falling in shallow, uneven breaths. Jack knelt beside him, running a hand over the animal's ribs, too prominent beneath the soaked coat. Dehydration, exhaustion, maybe worse. He grabbed a towel from the cabin and began rubbing the dog down, rough but careful, trying to coax warmth back into his battered body. The shepherd didn't resist. His eyes, a deep amber, tracked Jack's movements with eerie focus. Not fear, not gratitude, just awareness. Like he was assessing whether this human could be trusted. Jack poured fresh water into a bowl and held it close. The dog's nose twitched, but he didn't move. "Come on, tough guy," Jack murmured. "You didn't survive all that just to quit now." Slowly, the dog lifted his head. His tongue flicked out, lapping once, twice, before he gave in and drank greedily. Water dripped from his jowls, splashing onto the deck. Jack exhaled in relief. He checked for injuries, raw patches on the paws, a gash along one shoulder, but nothing life-threatening. No collar, no tags, just a scar along the flank, old and faded, shaped like a jagged line. Military. Police. The boat rocked gently as Jack steered toward shore. The dog watched him, unblinking. "You got a story, don't you?" Jack said. The shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, and for the first time his tail gave a single hesitant thump against the deck. The fluorescent lights of the small veterinary clinic buzzed overhead as Jack paced the worn linoleum floor. Ace, the name had come to him on the drive over, lay on the examination table, his breathing steadier now, but his body still tense under the vet's probing hands. Dr. Elena Mendez worked in silence, her brow furrowed as she checked his vitals, the sterile scent of antiseptic mixed with the salt still clinging to Ace's fur. Dehydrated, borderline hypothermic, and his paws are shredded, she said finally, smoothing a hand over Ace's flank. But his muscle tone, this isn't some family pet who fell off a boat. She paused, fingers brushing a patch of fur near his shoulder. There's something embedded here. Jack leaned in as she tweezed out a small, twisted piece of metal, a broken dog tag corroded by seawater. He turned it over in his palm. Most of the engraving was gone, but a single letter remained. "Ah." "You're full of mysteries, aren't you?" Jack muttered. Ace's ear flicked toward his voice, but his gaze stayed fixed on the wall, as if bracing for some unseen threat. Back at his cabin, Jack spread the contents of his first aid kit across the kitchen table. Bandages, antibiotic ointment, the broken tag. Outside, the wind rattled the palms, their shadows long in the fading light. Ace circled the room twice before settling by the door, his posture rigid, alert. Every creak of the house made his ears pivot. Jack dialed the only number that might make sense of this. Marcus Cole answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. "You realize it's 0300 Reynolds?" "I found a dog," Jack said. "Except I don't think he's just a dog." A pause. Then, "Describe him." By the time Jack finished, the calculated movements, the way Ace had scanned the shoreline like a sentry, Marcus was wide awake. "I'll be there by dawn." Jack hung up and turned to find Ace watching him, those amber eyes gleaming in the lamplight. There was intelligence there, a depth that unsettled him. This wasn't an animal who'd been lost. This was one who'd escaped. The tag glinted on the table between them, its single letter, a cipher. And as for Ace, as for something darker. Outside, an engine growled in the distance. Ace was on his feet in an instant, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Jack reached for his flashlight. "Guess we're about to find out." The engine's growl faded into the night, but Ace remained rigid at the window, his muscles coiled like springs. Jack flicked off the lights and peered through the blinds. Moonlight silvered the empty road, the only movement the sway of sawgrass in the coastal wind. Yet Ace's nose twitched, his ears swiveling toward some disturbance only he could sense. Marcus arrived just before dawn, his pickup kicking up gravel in the driveway. A bear of a man with a close-cropped beard and tactical boots. He moved with the deliberate calm of someone who'd spent too many years in war zones. Ace met him at the door, sniffing warily at his cargo pants before allowing a single pat on the head. "Definitely military," Marcus muttered, crouching to examine Ace's posture. "Look at how he squares his shoulders. That's a tack stance." He snapped his fingers sharply to the left. Ace's head whipped toward the sound, body pivoting with trained precision. Jack handed Marcus the broken tag. "Any idea what A stands for?" Marcus paled. "Asset." He pulled out his phone, scrolling through encrypted files until a blurred photo appeared. A German shepherd with the same scar pattern, flanked by men in unmarked fatigues. Operation Nightmark, covert canine units trained for offshore recon. They were all supposed to be. He trailed off, eyes darting to Ace. Ace suddenly stiffened. A low-frequency hum vibrated through the floorboards, helicopter blades distant but closing fast. Marcus cursed. They tracked the chips. He grabbed Ace's muzzle, probing beneath the fur. There, base of the skull. It's deactivated but still emitting. Glass shattered as a canister crashed through the kitchen window. Gas hissed into the room, acrid and chemical. Ace lunged for the door, but Jack yanked him back. "Garage," Marcus choked out, tossing Jack his keys. "Take my truck!" Ace moved like a shadow, herding Jack toward the back hall. Behind them, boots crunched on broken glass. A voice crackled over comms. "Asset A7, stand down." Ace didn't hesitate. He leapt through the garage's side window, shattering the remaining panes. Jack followed, the night air slapping him awake as they tumbled into the truck bed. Tires screamed against asphalt as Marcus peeled out, the helicopter's spotlight sweeping over them like a vengeful eye. In the rearview mirror, black figures fanned out across Jack's property. Ace pressed against his leg, warm and solid. They weren't just chasing a dog. They were erasing evidence. The truck careened down back-country roads, headlights off, guided only by the pale glow of the moon. Ace stood braced in the bed, his claws digging into the metal as wind ripped through his fur. Every few seconds, he'd glance back at the pulsing red light of the helicopter growing larger in the sky. Jack could feel the dog's body thrumming with tension, not fear, but something sharper. Purpose. Marcus wrenched the wheel hard left, sending them fish-tailing onto an old logging trail. Pine branches scraped the sides of the truck like skeletal fingers. "They'll have infrared," he shouted over the engine's roar. "We need water." A sudden memory flashed through Jack's mind. The abandoned quarry near Blackwater Pass, deep enough to mask their heat signatures. As if sensing his thought, Ace let out a sharp bark and nudged Jack's shoulder with his muzzle. The helicopter's spotlight swept across the tree line just as they skidded to a stop at the quarry's edge. Below, the inky water reflected the stars like shattered glass. Ace was moving before Jack could react, leaping from the truck and streaking toward a rusted maintenance shed. "Damn dog's got a plan," Marcus muttered. Inside the shed, Ace pawed at a floor grate. Jack wrenched it open to reveal a narrow service tunnel, dry, dark, and most importantly, shielded from aerial surveillance. They dropped into the passage just as rotor wash sent debris flying overhead. The tunnel stank of damp concrete and diesel. Ace led the way, his nails clicking rhythmically against the stone. After 50 yards, the passage opened onto a loading dock overlooking the quarry's far side. The helicopter circled impotently in the distance. Marcus exhaled sharply. "We can't keep running." Ace turned to face them. In the dim light, his eyes gleamed with unnerving intelligence. He trotted to Jack and dropped something at his feet, the broken dog tag. Then he sat, head high, waiting. Understanding crashed over Jack. "You want to end this?" Ace's tail gave one decisive thump. Marcus radioed an old contact while Jack pried the tracking chip from Ace's neck with his pocket knife. The dog didn't flinch. They'd bury it at the quarry's edge, a decoy. The real weapon would be Ace himself. As dawn bled across the horizon, Jack crouched to meet Ace's gaze. Last chance to walk away. Ace licked his hand once, then turned toward the approaching engine sounds. Muscles coiled. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Morning light spilled through the cabin windows, painting golden stripes across the hardwood floor. Ace lay sprawled in a sunbeam, his chest rising and falling in the deep, even rhythm of dreamless sleep. The scars on his paws had faded to pink streaks, and his coat, once dull with salt and exhaustion, now gleamed like polished amber. Jack stood at the screen door, watching the tide roll in. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation at the quarry. No more black SUVs, no helicopters, just the steady rhythm of coastal life, the cry of gulls, the whisper of waves, the creak of the dock beneath his boots. A rustling sound made him turn. Ace was awake, stretching with a luxurious groan before padding to Jack's side. No tension in his shoulders anymore, no searching the horizon for threats, just quiet contentment as he leaned against Jack's leg, warm and solid. The collar Linda had given them lay on the kitchen counter, the engraved nameplate catching the light. Ace. No numbers, no codes, just his. Jack ruffled the fur behind Ace's ears. Hungry? Ace trotted to his bowl with the casual confidence of a dog who knew this was his place now, his home. As he ate, Jack unfolded the newspaper on the table, another headline about unexplained military budget cuts, another op-ed questioning covert operations. He glanced at Ace, who was now sniffing around the door, tail wagging at some squirrel only he could hear. Some secrets were better left buried. That evening, they walked the beach as the sun melted into the Gulf. Ace bounded ahead, kicking up sand, pausing now and then to check that Jack was following, not out of duty, not because he'd been trained to, because he wanted to. When the first stars appeared, Ace returned to Jack's side, panting softly. For a long moment they stood together, listening to the waves. Jack knelt in the damp sand. Ace pressed his forehead against Jack's, his breath warm, his heartbeat steady against Jack's chest. No words needed. Some rescues went both ways. Some families were chosen. And some souls, no matter how broken, found their way home.